What would it cost to hide who you are for an entire lifetime? In Hollywood, where image is everything, many LGBTQ+ stars wore a mask far heavier than any role they ever played. Some hid their truth to protect their careers. Others never had the chance to come out at all. Share this video and tell us, which of these stories stayed with you the most? Let's bring light to the lives lived in the dark. In the early 1960s, George Maharis was television gold. As the brooding, leather-jacketed star of Route 66, he was adored by audiences and chased by the press. But when he suddenly exited the show at the height of its success, rumors swirled. Health reasons were cited, but insiders knew the truth was far more dangerous for his career. George had been arrested in a gay sex sting, something that could and nearly did end everything. Though he continued acting, his star never shone quite the same. For decades, he avoided questions about his personal life, fearing that being open would close every door. He never married, never confirmed, and carefully crafted a neutral image. He passed away in 2023 at age 94. Still widely admired, still closeted in the public eye. George Maharis was a man trapped between two highways, one of fame, the other of freedom, and for him, the two never truly intersected. Best known as the flamboyant Endora on Bewitched, Agnes Moorehead was anything but ordinary. A powerhouse of old Hollywood, she built a career on sharp wit and commanding presence. Yet her personal life remained an enigma. Never married, after a short, troubled union, she was often surrounded by women, close friendships that sparked whispers behind closed doors. Colleagues described her as intensely private, fiercely loyal, and completely uninterested in discussing her romantic life. She was part of a generation of actresses who were allowed to live alone, but never openly queer. Though she denied the rumors, never publicly embracing any label, her life was marked by solitude, discipline, and guarded mystery. Whether by choice or necessity, Agnes mastered the art of deflection in a time when authenticity could end a career overnight. She passed away in 1974, leaving behind a trail of characters larger than life and a personal truth that remained quietly her own. I want to be alone. With those words, Greta Garbo carved her name into cinematic legend, but behind the mystique was a woman who may have meant it more literally than we ever knew. One of Hollywood's most elusive stars, Garbo never married, rarely gave interviews, and retired from acting at the height of her fame. Whispers about her relationships with women, most notably playwright Mercedes de Acosta, have lingered for decades, supported by love letters, poems, and diary entries. But Garbo never confirmed anything. She chose seclusion over scrutiny and spent the last 50 years of her life walking Manhattan in oversized sunglasses, avoiding the world that once adored her. Whether she hid to protect her heart or her image, one thing is certain. The price of mystery was loneliness. Greta was not just an enigma to the public. She may have remained one even to herself. You may not know his name, but you definitely know his work. Henry Willson was the Hollywood talent agent behind some of the most iconic leading men of the 1950s. Rock Hudson, Tab Hunter, Troy Donahue. He crafted their images, renamed them, and in many cases, carefully orchestrated their public romances. But Henry himself was a gay man working from the shadows, spinning lies to protect his clients and himself. As the man who sold straight fantasies to a very straight world, he was both puppet master and prisoner. His power faded quickly, and by the 1970s, he was broke, blacklisted, and dying of cirrhosis in a shabby apartment. The man who built beautiful illusions died surrounded by none of them. Henry's story is not just one of secrecy. It is a chilling reminder of what happens when you sell dreams but never dare to live your own. Tyler Perry built an empire from scratch, writing, directing, and acting his way to the top of Hollywood's power list. But while his movies often focus on family, faith, and identity, his own story remains carefully guarded. For years, rumors about his sexuality have followed him, persistent and unrelenting. Perry has consistently denied being gay, sometimes dismissing the speculation as distractions from his work. Still, the conversations persist, especially as he continues to remain single and private. He rarely appears publicly with romantic partners and never addresses personal matters beyond surface-level interviews. While he has given millions a voice through his films, some wonder if he has ever truly found the space to live openly himself. Whether his silence is self-preservation or strategic branding, it reflects a lingering reality. Even in 21st century Hollywood, being rich, famous, and black may still not be enough to live out loud. Long before the word lesbian could be spoken aloud in Hollywood boardrooms, Dorothy Arzner was directing films, and doing it better than most men. The only female director in the 1930s working for major studios, Dorothy dressed in suits, lived with her partner Marion Morgan, and surrounded herself with strong women. Yet she never discussed her private life in public. She used her influence to lift other women, mentor young talents, and tell stories from a perspective the world didn't yet understand. Her success was groundbreaking, but her silence was strategic. Hollywood could tolerate her power, barely, but not her truth. She eventually left the industry, retreating into academia and private life. Dorothy's legacy paved the way for generations, but she paid a high price: visibility without personal freedom. She lived boldly but quietly behind the camera and behind the veil. She was strong, smart, and always a step ahead of her male co-stars. Barbara Stanwyck lit up Hollywood's golden age, playing powerful women who never needed saving. But the woman behind the roles was far more complex. Rumors of her relationships with women circulated for decades, yet Barbara never confirmed anything publicly. She married and divorced, kept a tight circle, and guarded her privacy with near-military precision. Close friends hinted at long-term female companionships, but Hollywood's unspoken rule of silence kept everything off the record. She lived and died as a fiercely independent woman, but also, perhaps, as someone who never felt safe enough to live her truth out loud. In her case, power and loneliness walked hand in hand, a bittersweet reminder that even the strongest stars sometimes carry the heaviest secrets. To the world, Tab Hunter was the all-American boy. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and box office gold. He dated starlets, graced magazine covers, and made teenage hearts race. But behind the polished smile was a man living in constant fear. Tab was gay, and in the 1950s, that could destroy everything. Studio executives arranged fake relationships and gossip columns printed what they were paid to print. Meanwhile, Tab fell in love with figure skater Ronnie Robertson and later with actor Anthony Perkins, but both romances were hidden from the world. It wasn't until 2005 in his memoir Tab Hunter Confidential that he finally told his truth. By then, the spotlight had long faded, but the weight had finally lifted. Tab's life was a masterclass in image control, but more importantly, in the courage it takes to reclaim your story, even decades too late. If glitter were a person, it would be Liberace. With rhinestone-studded capes, golden pianos, and chandeliers on stage, he was the king of showmanship. But for all his flamboyance, Liberace spent his life denying what the world could already see. He sued newspapers that labeled him gay. He called his lovers roommates, and he crafted a public persona so aggressively heterosexual it bordered on parody. Behind closed doors, however, he lived a very different life, filled with secret romances, lawsuits from former partners, and desperate efforts to keep his truth hidden. In the 1980s, as AIDS ravaged the gay community, Liberace fell ill. He refused to admit his diagnosis until the end. Even in death, he clung to the illusion. His passing in 1987 left fans shocked, not just by the loss, but by the lie they had believed for so long. He was a star who could command a stage, but never his own narrative. She commands stages, red carpets, and screens with confidence, but for much of her career, Queen Latifah has kept one part of her life strictly off limits. While the world speculated about her sexuality for decades, Latifah neither confirmed nor denied, opting instead for privacy that often masked pain. In interviews, she deflected, smiled, and changed the subject. Rumors about her long-term partner, trainer Ebony Nichols, lingered for years but were never publicly acknowledged. And while Latifah has become more openly supportive of LGBTQ+ causes, she only referred to her partner publicly for the first time in 2021, decades after she first hit the charts. Whether out of self-protection or industry pressure, Her silence spoke volumes about the dangers Black queer women still face in entertainment. Her legacy is legendary, but her journey, like many others, has been shaped by the quiet cost of keeping love in the shadows. She was just 12 when she stunned the world in Taxi Driver, and she has been in the spotlight ever since. But for most of her life, Jodie Foster avoided any mention of her sexuality. Fiercely private, she built a wall between her public persona and personal truth, one that even her Oscars and box office success could not tear down. In interviews, she joked, dodged, or simply refused to answer questions about her love life. Her silence was not shame. It was survival in an industry where openness could mean exile. It wasn't until the 2013 Golden Globes that she finally acknowledged her long-term partner in a speech that was emotional, cryptic, and deeply human. It was not a grand reveal, but a quiet declaration of exhaustion and honesty. Jodie's journey was not about coming out to us. It was about finally stepping into her own light after decades of hiding in the shadows. As one of the most respected journalists in television history, Barbara Walters spent decades asking others to share their deepest secrets while keeping her own under lock and key. Though she never identified as LGBTQ+, whispers followed her for years. Her fiercely close relationships with powerful women, her private nature, and her refusal to remarry all fueled speculation. But Barbara knew how the media worked. After all, she helped shape it. She never gave gossip columns the satisfaction of confirmation. Instead, she focused on breaking barriers in broadcast journalism while sidestepping questions about her own identity. Whether the rumors were true or not, Barbara's silence reveals a telling truth. Even the most powerful women in media could not always afford to be fully seen. In her case, control over the narrative was everything, and that control came at the cost of personal transparency. Few names stir more fascination than Tom Cruise. A box office titan, a global icon, and a mystery wrapped in $1 million smile. But behind the carefully curated image lies a cloud of questions that has followed him for decades. Despite high-profile marriages and endless press coverage, Cruise's private life has remained tightly controlled. Speculation about his sexuality has persisted since the 1990s, fueled by tabloid headlines, legal threats, and his fierce allegiance to Scientology, a group known for its rigid views on identity. He has never publicly addressed the rumors, and perhaps never will. But in a world that demands transparency from its stars, Tom's silence feels deafening. Whether rooted in belief, branding, or fear, his guarded life reminds us that even at the top, authenticity can feel too risky. The spotlight may adore him, but it has never truly touched the man beneath the legend. He was the quiet constant of classic Hollywood, a child actor turned character star who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Roddy McDowall never married, rarely spoke about his personal life, and carefully avoided controversy. But those who knew him best understood. Roddy was a gay man living within the strict, unspoken code of the studio system. He was beloved by peers, respected by directors, and trusted as a confidant, precisely because he never stepped out of line. He took friendships seriously, chose privacy over provocation, and never allowed the press a glimpse of his heart. When he died in 1998, he left behind a legacy of grace and discretion. Roddy never hid with bitterness. He simply lived with discipline. But in his restraint, we see the tragic cost of a generation who could only be loved if they were never fully known. He was the embodiment of masculinity on screen, the tall, rugged heartthrob who defined 1950s cinema. Rock Hudson kissed Doris Day, led epic romances, and charmed millions. But behind the carefully curated image, he lived a double life that nearly destroyed him. His homosexuality was an open secret in elite circles, yet studio contracts and publicists crafted an illusion so perfect, even rock began to disappear behind it. He married his agent's secretary in a publicity stunt that fooled no one close to him. His real relationships, private, quiet, and hidden, took place far from the cameras. When he was diagnosed with AIDS in the 1980s, his silence ended not by choice, but by necessity. His illness became the world's wake-up call to a growing crisis, and finally his truth was known. But it came too late. Rock Hudson died a legend, yes, but also a man robbed of the chance to ever live fully as himself. Chav 16, Montgomery Clift. His face was flawless, his talent undeniable, but Montgomery Clift's life was a slow unraveling behind the scenes. A contemporary of Brando and Dean, Clift redefined male vulnerability on screen. But off-screen, he wrestled with demons he could not name in public. As a closeted gay man in 1950s Hollywood, Monty lived in constant fear of exposure. After a near-fatal car crash in 1956, his pain deepened, physically and emotionally. He became reclusive, dependent on pills and alcohol, and by the time of his death in 1966, he had isolated himself from nearly everyone. Though beloved by co-stars, his personal life was carefully erased from the press. His performances were raw, intimate, unforgettable, and perhaps unknowingly autobiographical. Montgomery Clift gave everything to his craft, but never had the freedom to give the same honesty to his own life. With his razor-sharp wit and unforgettable voice, Paul Lynde was a comedic powerhouse. He lit up Hollywood squares and stole scenes in every sitcom he touched. But behind the laughter was a man haunted by insecurity and silence. Paul was gay, flamboyantly so in private circles, but never acknowledged it publicly. The 1970s weren't kind to campy gay men in Hollywood, and his career often stalled when producers deemed him too much. He masked loneliness with jokes and masked pain with vodka. Though adored by fans, he never found lasting love or safety in being out. He died alone in 1982, with no partner by his side. Paul Lynde made millions laugh, yet spent his life hiding from the very truth that gave his humor its sparkle. He lived in a closet full of applause, never knowing how it felt to open the door. Sal Mineo broke hearts in Rebel Without a Cause, earning an Oscar nomination at just 17. But his career, unlike his co-stars, never soared. As whispers of his sexuality grew louder in the 1960s, roles grew scarce. Hollywood had no space for openly gay men, not even one as talented as Sal. He turned to theater, took smaller parts, and quietly embraced his identity in private. Just as he began rebuilding momentum in the late 1970s, he was murdered outside his apartment in a senseless act of violence. The press focused on the crime, not the man. Rarely did they mention the weight he carried just to live authentically. Sal Mineo died young, but not before giving the world glimpses of who he truly was, in both his art and the quiet resistance of living his truth, even when it cost him everything. Audiences knew him as the unshakable Perry Mason, a legal mind with a granite stare and a voice that commanded any courtroom. But off-camera, Raymond Burr lived a very different truth. For decades, he fabricated stories of wives who never existed, even inventing a tragic child who died young. The truth, Raymond was gay and lived most of his adult life with his partner, Robert Benavides. But to preserve his career during the rigid 1950s and 60s, he rewrote his own life for the press. Even after his death in 1993, official biographies still hesitated to acknowledge Robert's role in his life. Raymond didn't just act on screen, he acted in life, every single day. His legacy is not just one of courtroom drama, but of quiet endurance in a world that left no room for men like him to love openly. Best known as Mel Cooley on The Dick Van Dyke Show, Richard Deacon was a familiar face in American households, witty, mild-mannered, and beloved. Yet off-screen, he lived a carefully concealed life. Never married, rarely photographed outside of work, and absent from gossip columns, Deacon maintained his privacy with military precision. Those close to him knew he was gay, but the public never did. He was a steady working actor in an era where being out meant no work at all. So he kept quiet, stayed polite, and kept acting. When he passed in 1984, there were tributes to his humor, his professionalism, but none to his truth. Richard Deacon was not a headline maker, but he was part of a silent generation who built the entertainment we love today, while quietly sacrificing the right to be themselves within it. They lived for applause, but longed for honesty. These were not just stars, they were human beings who carried their truth in silence. Let us honor them not for the roles they played, but for the courage they never got to show. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to support more stories that deserve the light. Your voice keeps their memory alive.